Next time on Painting and Travel, Roger and Sarah travel to Tennessee, where they visit a farm in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Sarah explores the farm, while Roger paints one of its red barns.
Tennessee is a beautiful state, and in eastern Tennessee we have the Smoky Mountains behind us, and we're in the foothills here. We get a lot of pretty scenes. We've had a lot of fun exploring, taking a few hikes, walking, looking at beautiful barns, all types of barns in this area. There are pole barns, dairy barns, horse barns, barns to store hay in, silos, huge barns that used to be used for lots and lots of cattle in the past. And now I spoke with a farmer earlier today, and he told me that there used to be over 60 dairy farms in this area, and now they're less than 10.
We've been traveling through these back roads, and we came across this picture-perfect barn. There are so many like that in this area. So I'm going to get started. I have an 11 by 14 inch piece of masonite, and I've taken a piece of charcoal, and just to save a bit of time, I've sketched this composition in here, and I've based it on these big broad areas instead of little details. I don't have many details in here, just the big shapes. That way I can visualize my composition a bit better. We have a pretty lake down here. We have a red barn. What I like about this scene here is the beautiful contrast between this red barn, which is in shadow, so it's very dark. So we have a nice contrast between that dark red barn and the mountains in the background, which are very blue this morning. So I'll get started. For my paints, I have titanium white, alizarin crimson, Indian yellow, and ultramarine blue. These are 3 transparent colors. Now, people sometimes ask me how you can tell, how can you tell they're transparent? So here's how you can tell the difference. The easiest way is to look on the tube, but not all tubes state that, and sometimes it's not so easy to find. So to put it to the test, I've made a black stripe here. I've put out a number of colors here, and this one here is my Indian yellow, which is a transparent color. When I paint this over the black stripe, you can readily see that the black shows through. So this is a transparent color. And then when I put this yellow over this black stripe, you can see that it covers fairly well. There's quite a difference between those two. So this is a transparent color, and this is an opaque color. Now, just because this is Indian yellow and this is transparent doesn't mean that all Indian yellows will be transparent. I've seen some manufacturers that manufacture an Indian yellow that's very, very opaque. It's usually the less expensive brands. Here I'll take some ultramarine blue. We'll do the same thing here. This is pretty hard to see because those are both dark colors, but the black does show through. Now on my cerulean blue, you can see that's very opaque. It does definitely covers. And we'll go down the line. We'll pick up alizarin crimson, transparent color. And as we paint that over here, you can see that the black shows through. It doesn't cover very well. So that's a transparent color. Now I'll pick up some of my cadmium red light, and it's a very opaque color. So we have transparent, opaque, and so on. Now I find by starting out my paintings with the transparent colors, I can get much nicer, richer, and darker colors than using any of my opaque colors. Now, if you find your painting is getting chalky or muddy, especially when using glazes, most likely it's because you're using opaque colors. So when using glazes, it's most important to use the transparent colors. Here I'll pick up some white. Of course, this is titanium white, and of course it covers very well. But there are other whites too. There's a zinc white, and now that's a transparent white. I use that very seldom, but it would be good in some instances, like if you're doing a painting that maybe requires some fog or mist or smoke or something like that. So they all do have their uses. I'll put one other color out here, and this is yellow ochre. And it is quite close in value to the Indian yellow, but very opaque as opposed to the Indian yellow. These are really translucent colors. They're not transparent, but artists generally call them transparent. Transparent would be something like glass where you could see totally through it. Translucent has some color to it. So as a rule of thumb, I generally start out my paintings using transparent colors, and they generally work good for a foundation of the painting. I may put out some opaque colors later, especially a yellow, to get some vivid greens. But I'm going to start with these three transparent colors because they'll give me a lot of nice, dark, rich tones. I think I'll start by maybe putting in this sky, which is very brilliant today, but it's very pale, it's very light. And I'm going to mix up my ultramarine blue and white and put a touch of yellow in that just to warm it a bit. Now these are acrylics, so they'll dry very fast, and if this is not the color I want, or the color that looks right, I can go over that within a matter of a few minutes. They're a little more warm color down here towards the base of the mountains, and we'll keep it a little cooler up in this area. And I'll just blend that back and forth rather briskly, and that will smooth all that together. I don't think I want any clouds or anything. There are no clouds in the sky today, but I want this to be a nice flat area because there's so much texture going on down here. I don't want anything up here to take away from the impact of that texture that might occur down in this area. I'll take this rag. Now this is just charcoal. I can wipe this off, but enough of that stays on there where I can clearly see my drawing. Well, I'm not sure it matters exactly what I put in here next, but let's try the barn. We'll get the alizarin crimson, Indian yellow, ultramarine blue. We'll mix all three of those together, but we'll leave more red in there than anything. That'll keep it nice and warm. And you see how dark that is? Now, if I had opaque colors, this would not be nearly as dark because opaque colors have white in them. I'm not mixing these colors very thoroughly here on my palette. I don't need to. I like the idea of having just some variation going on here as opposed to the sky where I want that very flat. Here I like the idea of having some variation in this, in the colors here in the barn. Here, and I'll place these vertical strokes in here because most of the wood on that is vertical. Here we have a little more down here. Right inside here in the barn, it's very dark. I'm just going to paint that right now with this same red color. I can kind of see the outline there, and when that dries, I'll just go over this red and put in some more dark colors. We have another little red structure here, a shed of some sort. Now this structure right in front of the barn, as I squint my eyes, it's almost the same value as the barn, meaning it's just about the same darkness as this barn, although it's a totally different color. So we'll take this red, put a little bit of white in that, but we'll use mostly these three colors again, and it seems to be much cooler, so I'll put more blue in this one. Now you can see this is dark and this is dark. It's about the same value, although I tend to see that little house as being somewhat lighter, so I'll put just a touch of white in there. And as I squint my eyes and look at that, this barn is darker. This is just a bit lighter, which is what I want here. And I can adjust these as I go along, and I'm sure I'll have to because every color affects the color next to it. So I can't really tell if these are the proper colors quite yet. I have to get this board covered before I can start making too many adjustments. Well, why don't we jump back up to these mountains? And they're very blue this morning. There's so much atmosphere between us and the mountains there that they're going to be very blue. I don't want to make them a pure blue because that would look false. So I've mixed it with my other colors here on the palette while they're still wet. Now as I look at that, the mountains are very, very light compared to this barn. So that is way too dark. Put some more white in here. This is always such a balancing act between getting the lights and darks the right value, the right lightness and darkness. So I have to keep looking at everything as I go and comparing, well, is this darker and this lighter and so on. So I gotta hit that happy medium in there where these values are as close as I can get them. Now the colors can be slightly off, but if the values are off, then the painting won't look good. It's more important to have the correct values in a painting than it is the correct colors. I like to have the correct colors too, but if I have a choice, I want to get the correct values. That's why black and white drawings and black and white photographs work. It's all about values, about lights and darks. As you can tell, it's autumn here and the leaves are changing. There's some beautiful trees that we've seen, and they're speckled in amongst these nearby hills. So we'll get a lot more variations in color in these nearby hills than we will in the background, because here we've got so much atmosphere. It tends to all sort of fade away into one color. And here we have them closer, so we'll get more variations in color and tone. And I'll squint my eyes again and I'll see that this barn is definitely darker than these hills. So I'll try and lighten them. You know, we have a number of cows up on the hill here, over here in the lake, coming down to drink. I'm just going to speed this along. I won't worry too much about my brush strokes right now. My main concern is to just get this canvas or this board covered. This is a warm color. So back here we have a very cool color in the mountains. As this comes forward, we've got more warm colors. I'll just bring those down into this area. Right down in here, it gets even more vivid. We get into the pastures and the fields, so they become a nice rich green color. And again, they're very light. Well, let me jump down here in the foreground and we'll get some of this grass color going. I'll mix some Indian yellow and ultramarine blue, and I have some white already on there. And this isn't terribly dark, but I'm going to make this darker than I see it because I want to be able to put my lighter colors over these dark colors. So I'll start with some dark colors as a base. And I'll just give this a lot of rough brushwork here, because as this dries, I'll be able to utilize some of this texture here underneath to make it look like this field of grass. So we got a nice flat area going here, and then we'll have a lot of texture going in these other areas. Yes, this is much too dark, but you'll see in a moment or two how we can use that to advantage. Now these fields in the back will tend to be much flatter, more texture up here, and then as it goes back, these fields will be flatter and flatter. We'll leave that right there. Let me see, we'll fill in a little more here. Down here by the lake, the weeds and the grass tends to be a little browner for some reason, so we'll put some red in there, make that somewhat browner. Right along that little shoreline there. I think I can take some of this and just the thin paint, drag this down here. That can be our reflection for now. Then we'll come up here, we'll mix some of the sky color again. And we'll put a touch of the lake here. I don't want to feature the lake very much. It is a beautiful feature of this landscape, but I don't want to get too much going on in this painting. I don't want this lake or this pond to take away from the interest here in the barn. So I'm going to downplay this pond. Now I can tell as I look at this barn, I don't have the proportions quite right. But with the acrylics, since they dry so fast, it's easy to change that. I have it a little bit too narrow, and it's much wider there. Not a lot wider, but somewhat wider. So we'll just make this wider here. And this paint, that's dry to the touch. Nice thing about acrylics, if I don't like it, I just wait a moment and go over it. The barn has such nice proportions. I want to get them fairly accurate. Well, this is a good part in the painting because I have the board all covered with something. Now I can take more of a critical look at it and go in and see what needs to be changed. I can see the mountains need to be somewhat lighter, and as I look at those mountains up there, they're not just a solid blue. There are a lot of variations because as the mountains dip in and out, the shadow areas become more blue. Where the light is coming on them, it's more green. So I'll start by refining these mountains. I have my atomizer here. This will help keep my paint wet. And I'll spray this too. It doesn't keep the paint wet on this board very much, but it helps my paints flow over the dry paints. And I see the shadow side in these mountains way in the distance there. They're not only bluer, but they're somewhat darker. So I'll start to put a few of these shadows in on this side of the mountains. Now if I spray this, I'll be able to wipe my brush off, dry my brush off, and take these paints I just put on there and kind of blend them out so I'll have a nice soft edge, because I don't want any hard edges back on those mountains because they're so far in the distance. We have a few long shadows in here. Keep those nice and soft. Now for this part of the mountain, I see that's a bit more green on it. We use this color here as our sort of our base coat. Now we can go in and refine the colors within that base coat. So that tends to be more green and somewhat lighter. I'm mixing this right here along with my blue so I can tell that the values of this and this right now are about the same. I want the values of these trees just a tad bit lighter so I can see the difference here, and this is somewhat lighter. There, we'll put some light patches here in the mountains. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll continue to move down here. I think I'll spray my board and take a razor blade and clean this. There, now I have a fresh little area to work with. Down here I'm seeing those gorgeous fall leaves on the trees over there. And I may sort of enhance what I'm looking at somewhat, maybe brighten them up a degree or two. I don't want to overdo it, but it's nice as a painter that we can change things around to sort of suit ourselves in these paintings. I think the cows down there must agree. I think maybe they're hungry. It's delightful sitting out here in this wonderful field, listening to cows all around. Now I'll mix up some darker greens. I'm going to mix up this green here and put some greens in here, but I have to be careful not to get these greens darker than this red here. Now the red on this barn it's certainly not a fresh coat of paint, so A lot of it is kind of worn away. We've got our base coat on there. Let's try and refine the barn, because this is our focus of attention of this whole painting. I think maybe we'll go down in a little while and visit that barn, and we'll see what's going on in there.
I've noticed that the cows here, the dairy cows, are almost like pets. They're very friendly. When we walk even close to them, they usually come up to take a look at us. And so they must be very well treated, almost like pets. We'll walk closer and get a look at these beautiful cows. These look to be young cows here. Hi, little beauties, how are you? Is this your home? Is this your beautiful dairy barn? Yeah, a little frisky, a little young. Yeah. Yeah. This whole area is so beautiful to drive around in. It's fun to take the back roads here, and it's actually hard to get lost these days because everybody's got GPS, but do yourself a favor, turn off your GPS and just take a road that appeals to you and take a lovely drive. Have your camera handy, and if you like to paint, of course, have a little plein air paint set with you. Want to try a little? Do you want to try some? I guess every dairy barn has a few dairy cats, and here's a really nice little guy here. Hi. Hi, what's your name? We've seen so many beautiful scenes, we've had to take lots of pictures so we can take these back to our studio and have them for future reference.
There seem to be beautiful subjects everywhere here in the mountains of Tennessee. Not only looking at this beautiful barn, but right beneath my feet there's a beautiful subject for a painting. It's just everywhere. I'm going to take some vertical strokes and start to put in some of the look of some of these boards. This is very, very dark as in compared to the rest of the values of this painting. We are quite far out in the country here. Usually we have noises like automobiles and things like that to contend with, but today we've got a little bit more nature than usual. Okay, right up here at the top we have a very dark area, so I'll mix all three of my colors. That will give me a very, very dark color, and we'll put in this dark area right here. It's a nice opening right there. Here we have another opening here, and it's nice. It's good I painted that color in there to begin with, because now I can put these darks right over that, and I'm sure they're going to end up being as dark as I want them to be. Here we have another, just part of another doorway there. Now this is kind of subtle, because as I squint my eyes, I can see that there's not too much difference in the value of these tones here and this. But this is somewhat darker. I hope you can see that on your screen. I'll put some yellow in that, and we'll start putting in some of our shadows. There is also a beautiful tree over here. I think I may put that in much, much later. Now, by putting in these shadows very dark, it tends to plant firmly this structure to the ground. It will keep it from looking like it's floating, so it's important to put in some good strong shadows. And these shadows also too will help to describe the flow of the landscape. So as we drag this shadow down, it obviously will indicate that this flows downhill. There's another building there. I had it sketched in and sort of lost that, but there's another building right in the back there. I think I'll add that now. And it's a white barn, so of course it's in shadow, so I'm making this sort of a cool gray color here. And the roof on top is a tin roof. It is catching the light, so it's going to be much brighter. So I'll put an indication of that. The roof right here, it's behind this red barn. That structure there goes away from us, so the perspective of this roof slants up this way, and the bottom of the house, bottom of the building will go this way. This is one point perspective here. We're looking straight onto it, so we can't see either side of the building. Take this dark color once again with all three of my primary colors, and we have a couple of small windows down here. I like how these windows are sort of unevenly spaced. It makes it very interesting, as opposed to having them evenly spaced across here. We've got one here and then two, so it makes a nice pattern. This is totally dry now, so I can take this paint and use my paints as a glaze. And I'm going to put that on the bottom here. I want these two areas here to be almost nondescript. I want this structure here just to blend in right with the earth below it. Wow, I've never heard such verbal animals as those cows in the barn. Back here, this is much lighter. Remember I said I was going to put these dark greens in here just so I could put the lighter greens over them? So that's what I'm going to do.
At this point, Roger is halfway through the painting, which he will complete in our next episode of Painting and Travel. But before we go, we'll leave you with a look at the finished painting from part 2 of the Red Dairy Barn.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.